So Planet Earth 2 episode 3 is about the jungles, and this episode opens up with footage of Indri, which we find in Madagascar. We kind of just see them, they're quite good shots of them just jumping from tree to tree. We saw it in the trailer, it was quite a relatively big part of the trailer. I'm pretty sure that's how the trailer opens up with Indri. And it's quite a good sequence. I mean, we saw Indri briefly in the Islands episode. We definitely get more of them here. It's nice to see them. We just kind of see them jumping around and, you know, making that iconic call that sounds a bit like a slide whistle, which is always good for me. And yeah, it's an alright way to open the episode. From there we move on to South or Central America, where we see spider monkeys. So the spider monkey sequence involves a young female spider monkey who's learning the ropes of how to survive in the trees, and she decides to go into the upper reaches of the canopy, even though she's not ready for it yet. Sure enough, she gets into trouble and her dad has to save her basically. It's fine, it's not an amazing bit of footage. I feel like I'd seen this before in another series. I think it might have been Life Story. It's fine, it's an alright bit of footage. I think kind of reminded me the way I felt about the Ibex in the last one, where I just kind of didn't have any real strong opinions of it. I mean, it's fine, but you know, but there's better parts to the episode, I think. From there we move on to Draco lizards, which are lizards we see kind of battling for space on a tree in the rainforest, and one of them gets the upper hand and the other one has to basically glide off the tree. These are lizards they're the flying lizards. I knew that happened, but no, it's still an alright bit of footage. Again, another bit where I was like, that's alright, but I didn't have any real strong opinions of it. Then we have the hummingbirds. So the hummingbird sequence is a bit better. I think we mainly focus on sword-billed hummingbirds, which have this massive, like, really long beak. But we see it, and it's interesting how it can, obviously it's this really long beak that can feed in flowers that other hummingbirds can't reach. And it's alright. We also see the kind of hindrance that it has, like it's a nightmare to groom itself, it's having to use its feet. Again, another bit where I thought that was alright, which it's a bit disappointing, I think. The three first main bits of footage we see in the series, I didn't really have much of an opinion of, so it kind of doesn't set you into the rest of the episode very well, I think. But after that it does pick up where we see the flooded forest, and in the flooded forest of Brazil we see river dolphins. Now this is a species of river dolphin that had been recently discovered at the time. They weren't like botos, the pink river dolphins that we normally see in the Amazon. And we see them just swimming around the forest. It's really cool seeing them in the forest. I mean, I knew they were there. I knew that river dolphins live in, you know, South America. But it's cool seeing them swimming amongst the trees. It's just, as Attenborough says, like it's not something you'd expect to see. And the great footage we have of them swimming in the open channels is quite good as well. It's a pretty good bit of footage, I think. They don't really do a huge amount, but it's nice sometimes seeing something that you don't normally see, even if it's not doing anything particularly interesting, is nice, I think. And I think that's the case with this bit of footage. From there we move on to what I think is the Pantanal in Brazil. They don't ever say where it is, but it looks like it was, where we see loads of animals. We see capybara, we see caiman, we see giant river otter, and we see jaguars. Now, up to this point, I don't think jaguars were quite common in these programs. I hadn't seen many footage of jaguars, I don't think. I feel like I hadn't up to this point, but it's really good. I mean, you see jaguars getting compared to leopards quite a lot, because obviously they're both spotty. I think this episode did a really good job of showing you that no, there really is no comparison between the two. I mean, jaguars are huge. Especially the male you see, it is enormous. Like, it really is big. And we spend a lot of time with the jaguars in this episode. Like, not as much as the snow leopards in the last one, but I think they do get the bulk of the screen time here, I think. And you see them just, the females trying to hunt like capybara unsuccessfully. We see them fishing, also unsuccessfully. It's interesting showing you like the size difference between them and the capybara. It really is stark. But then we see the male, and the male's just, he's not bothered with capybara. He's got bigger fish to fry. And I knew that jaguar hunted caiman. Spoiler alert, that's what they're hunting. I'd never seen it before, and this one you do see it, and it's a really good bit of footage. You see the jaguar just leap in to the river and just grab what you don't know at the time as a caiman. They do stress how you know, good at killing caimans are, how, like, you know, vicious they are, even though they really aren't compared to most other crocodilians. And you see them, it actually cuts back to caimans a lot throughout the sequence, which is kind of a hint that's where they're going with it. So a lot of subtle nods in there, you know, like BBC knew what they were doing with that one. But we see the jaguar basically just crunching into this caiman. You hear the crunch as it breaks the back of its skull. And the caiman's not going down easy, like it's putting up a fight. And it's a really good sequence, and then we see the jaguar just dragging the caiman off. And it cuts to this capybara just with its mouth agape. Just, it's one of those shots that just stands out. That's so comedic. It stands out so much. That capybara had definitely seen some shit that day. Probably the highlight of the episode. So after the jaguar sequence, we move into back to the actual rainforest. No water in this part. And we talk about camouflage. We see some examples like leaf-tailed geckos. We don't spend a lot of time with them though. But then we see glass frogs. Now glass frogs were an animal I'd heard of. I'd heard of the name glass frog. I didn't really know anything about them at the time. But they were really good. You see this male glass frog. Now their back is like kind of dotted. It has like clusters of dots around its back, which becomes important. But we see this frog and he's looking after his tadpoles. There's various clusters of them with various different ages, and we see wasps coming to get them. And the wasps manage to get some of the tadpoles. Some of them just jump out their spawn. Again, which was really cool. I didn't know they did that. They don't look like they're ready to leave just yet, but they just spring out in the sign of danger into the water below, which is really cool. But the ones that can't are helpless basically. They can't do anything to save themselves because they're not really tadpoles yet. See the frog, because it has those dots on its back, they look like tadpoles. They look like the first cluster of spawn, and the wasps go for that, and he's able to kick them away. And the wasps just look stunned. They don't know what's just hit them. But it's a really good bit of footage. Again, I didn't know anything about that. I feel like that was the part of this episode that surprised me the most at the time. From there, we turn off the lights and we see the darkness of the jungle. And we see fungus for a bit. Now, fungus was famously featured in Planet Earth, the first Planet Earth, in one of the most horrific sequences featuring cordyceps. So this, it kind of feels like the secret elements kicking in, where we're seeing where footage harkens back to stuff we saw in the first Planet Earth. It doesn't quite capture that. We see a beetle essentially pollinate the fungus, and that's alright, but it's cool just seeing them. From there we see the railroad worm though, which is a form of beetle larvae. It has this like bioluminescence along its side, green along its side and red at its tip of its head. And it hunts millipedes, and it's really cool. Again, another animal I'd never heard of or seen in these programs, so it's always cool seeing stuff you don't see before. And you see it just hunting millipedes, and it's good. You don't actually see the kill, you just see the millipede follow the light into the tunnel, and you hear the crunch. Obviously there wouldn't be a crunch in real life, but you know what's happened. It's a good sound effect. So yeah, it's a really good bit of the episode as well, I thought. From there we turn the lights back on and we go to what must be Papua New Guinea to see Birds of Paradise. So Birds of Paradise for me, I feel like I've seen them a lot. They feature a lot in these kind of programs. It feels like any excuse to have them in there. They're a favourite of Attenborough's, and if you've seen a lot of his programs, you'll have seen loads of Birds of Paradise. It's just a fact. And here they were pretty good. You see that really small one? It's like a sparrow-sized one. I can't remember the name of it. But it's basically attracting the female, and it's always, something that's nice about Birds of Paradise. You never know what they're going to do. You never know what there's going to be a display, but you don't know what the display is going to be. In this one, it's like this iridescent green, which looks really cool. It like really contrasts with the rest of the forest floor, which is green, but it doesn't stand out as much. And it really is good. And he gets his way. He gets the female. Gets the bump cloacas with the female, which is always lovely. And from there we kind of end the episode with the Indres again in Madagascar. We use that to talk briefly about the environment. We talk about how deforestation's happening and how a lot of the Indres are just dying out because they only live in these forests and they're all going, and about half the Indre families have disappeared. I like how they did say that the rainforests are also home to one of our closest cousins. I would argue that they're home to most of our closest cousins. I mean, the majority of primates live in the rainforest, but regardless of that, it's nice. The episode ends with this close-up of an Indre's eye, which is quite a haunting image. It's a really, stands out, and then we just see it slowly closing, almost like the window to save the Indre is also closing. It's a nice little poetic ending there. And then the last part is the making of, behind the scenes, obviously. And it's about the guys that filmed the dolphins. And it's a good sequence. You really feel like they were in an uncomfortable position. I mean, I feel like shooting in the jungle is always uncomfortable. I was just imagining the mosquitoes they were going to get, but they don't even talk about that. They talk about like the rain, the spider, stuff like that. It was interesting that this was before drones became like the go-to thing for these programs. I feel like Seven Worlds One Planet was the series that really like made drones the big thing. So it's interesting showing them the drones kind of came out as like a not a last resort, but like weren't like the prime way of filming. Like if that came out today, we'd have had drone footage all over. It would have just been drone footage. We wouldn't have had like them probably going through the forest as much. It would have been very drone heavy. I think on another note, if we had more drone footage in this series, we wouldn't have the guys jumping off mountains in the last episode. Overall, this episode is good. I Don't think it's as good as Mountains. For me, there's quite a lot in this episode that feels a bit like filler. The Jaguars were great. The Glass Frogs were also really good. I really liked Dolphins. I really liked the Railroad Worm, weirdly. And the stuff with injuries were nice. I just felt like there was a bit in this episode that felt like filler. I don't know how it compares with the Islands episode, because at no point in this episode did I want to phone Samaritans after seeing some crabs getting harassed by ants. So this might have the edge of the Islands episode, but then also there was nothing in it as good as the Razor Snakes and the Iguanas, so there is that. Overall, this episode is good. You should watch it if you haven't already. And if you haven't, why were you watching this? Yeah, so what did you like of this episode? Did you like the same stuff I liked? Did you think that this was better than the Islands? Did you think it was better than the Mountains? I don't know, what was your favourite bit? Let me know. And also, as always, feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Options there. Door's always open, or the subscriber box window is always open. It's not open, is it? No. Anyway, I'll be doing the Deserts episode next, so see how that goes. And yeah, see you then. Goodbye.